My name is Eric Teetsel. I'm the program manager here at the American Enterprise Institute for the Common Sense Concept, and I'm 26.
And so, in your own words, what are you doing right now to have an impact on the world?
Wow. Well, we are trying to, in the most basic terms, be a part of a conversation that's occurring among specifically evangelical college students. There's a passion among that generation to engage the world and to be a part of improving the world in which we live. That's a terrific thing, but there's a sense among certain people that along with passion, we need to imbue a sense of what is true, what is really going to be effective for change, lasting change. And so our goal is to augment passion with some thinking about how economics, public policy more generally, can be used to coincide with the most basic values of Christian faith to better the lives of people all around the world.
So what are some ways that manifests itself on a little more specific scale? What are some examples of how that's worked?
We do a lot of programming on campuses, and then also here at the AEI headquarters in Washington, D.C. So that can look like any number of different things. There are large campus-wide events. We recently hosted a conversation between the president of the American Enterprise Institute, a man named Arthur Brooks, and Jim Wallace, who's the CEO of Sojourners. Michael Gerson, who is a Bush speechwriter, moderated that event, just gave them an opportunity to talk about their different approaches, both from a faith perspective, but very different approaches to how economics can be used or can hurt those most in need. So that was one example, but we're also really interested in engaging students on a much more intimate, small group level. So it could be clubs and organizations, it could be speaking to a class, it could be just grabbing coffee and chatting about ideas. We've also published some books. There are 3 out now, and there will be 5 additional books coming out in 2011. And those books provide a basis for that conversation. They're really the rich, deep content, while also remaining very accessible, we hope. And so a starting point for discussion, and then also providing that sort of intellectual basis for applying those ideas in the real world later on. And then, as I said, we do events here in DC too. One of the neat events we just did was another conversation with Peter Greer, who's the president of a microfinance-based ministry called Hope International, and Shane Claiborne from The Simple Way, talking about how the parable of the the parable of the Good Samaritan applies to modern day efforts to help the poor.
Great. And was there a certain event that inspired you to, do this kind of Christian-based, counseling or programming, or was it kind of just something that you stumbled into?
Yeah, I, as a professional, was working in student life in Christian higher education, and alongside of that had a personal interest in economics, and in particular sort of a free enterprise approach to those things. In the last couple of years, I've begun to see the way that those intersect, and it seems that college students are engaging the world of ideas in a way that has economic implications without necessarily economic understanding that's deep and true. And so it was my desire to be a part of bringing those things together. And it just happened to coincide with the American Enterprise Institute, which was trying to do roughly the same thing. So I've been given this wonderful blessing of a vocation that allows me to meld my personal passions and interests with some very generous funding and sort of the aegis of a DC-based think tank that enables us to connect with some of the most important, brightest minds that are dealing with these issues.
Definitely. And what are some ways that, you've worked across traditional boundaries, be it, combining Christian faith and economics or anything like that?
Yeah, well, Christian faith and economics is something that a lot of people talk about. It's a pretty sexy conversation. It's not always talked about from the particular viewpoint that we are trying to talk about it, which is a more, as I mentioned, a free enterprise-oriented viewpoint. Our side, to put it in those terms, has done a pretty poor job of making the case for, capitalism, essentially, using more than just data. Data is good, but we care about real human beings, not abstractions. And so we want to talk about the moral case for capitalism, how this affects actual real people in their everyday lives. So it's really new in that way. And then getting to do it with people like Shane Claiborne and Jim Wallace and others is another tremendous opportunity. So often the two, if you want to say there are two stark sides to this conversation. It's not a conversation. It's two people talking past each other, and I think that is probably the fault of people on my side more than the other way around. Certainly been my experience that as we've said, hey, we're actually willing to engage in conversation, and those folks on the other side have been more than happy to oblige us with these really terrific engagements.
Great. What are some of the challenges you see facing young people? And you kind of hit on it, one of them with not understanding the economic implications of some of our good faith. But what are some of the other challenges you might see facing young people? There's many.
Challenges. Well, my experience in college, and one that I noticed many other students experiencing as I was working with them after I graduated as a professional, is that you're sort of inundated by opportunities to do good things. There's always a ministry to be a part of, or an activism group. There's always a cause to contribute to. And it can be hard to know where your limited resources can be applied. And the truth is that there is no right way to do that. God calls us each to do something. And oftentimes it can be a very different thing from what your friends are doing and other people that you see. So discernment is a tough thing to figure out. Discernment in terms of allocation of self. I think one of the neat things about our project is that there are some very specific ways that students can be involved in these things. You can do an internship with me, for example. You can read the books and promote them on your campus, but you can also just let the ideas sort of simmer in your mind, and then go out and live and be a part of culture and figure out for yourself. At the end of the day, economics is about choice. That's what it is. It's a study of choice. So as you're making choices as a human being engaging in the world, these are ideas that can inform those decisions. That's going to come with challenges too, as you're going to be stuck wondering, okay, my values are my neighbors immediately and on a global scale. What kind of coffee should I buy that is most beneficial as a part of this community, of those two communities? That's a complicated decision to try to reach, and one that's fraught with implications. So just simply being aware of it is a really good place to start, and then continuing to struggle with those decisions is a terrific thing.
And following up is the last question. What advice do you have for a young person who wants to get involved in the political process or their communities or youth mobilization? What would you tell them?
The truth is that as I look back on the story of how I've landed where I am, there is no explanation. I mean, I can go back and I can sort of say this piece fit with that piece, fit with that piece, but I could never have plotted that out and said as a college freshman, this is where I'm going to be at points A, B, C, D, and E. The truth is we all live in God's economy, and He causes things to fit together. And so the best thing that you can do is surrender your life to Him and be along for the ride.